Budget for the new year will not change, says Minister of Finance Honourable Premier Tokitalangi. He said the outlook for the island is positive. Reports of a $4 million deficit is not going to prove right, says Honourable Premier Tokitalangi.
I can't imagine that any government, any responsible government, will take a budget with a $4 million deficit of the House. That's a ridiculous proposition. Therefore, no, there will not be. But let me say, though, that the investment and development part of the budget is also looking very good. A lot of countries are providing assistance to go through donors. The Japanese, the Chinese, the Indian, Koreans, EU and so on, as well as our main support in New Zealand. I'm very pleased that New Zealand continues to have confidence in us and provide assistance not just for the recurrent budget, but also the current operational budget, but also for the investment development. We can start now to see some of the benefits that have derived from that. And I'm very pleased that New Zealand and we have the same outlook, if you like, and vision with respect to what we do in Niue.
Honourable Premier said there are different areas of the budget the government maintain and focus on.
Well, I always say that the budget is comprised of two specific areas, and that's operational and the investment and development budget. I'm pleased to say that we will continue to provide for the operational side and will provide a balanced budget for our country. Within that will be some minor changes, but the changes are more to do with the transformation with regard to the shifting of some of the commercial operations or training operations in the government towards a more commercial model that we're using at the present moment, copying the bond store, the house rental market, and as well as civil inquiry that we're doing at the present time. Those changes we're doing at the present moment are basically to reduce the cost, increase our revenues, and determine what we can do with that money in a manner that will be self-sustaining in the long term. So from an operational side, the power, the water, the roads, the telecommunications and so on, what we're trying to do is to ensure that we minimize the faults, if you wish, minimize the times when these things are not operating and so on, and improve the services to our people. I suppose the second part is make sure that we have sufficient money to continue to pay people. I've always said that. That continues to be the mandate that the government will hold with respect to our people here, as well as to pay our whatever debts that we make, invoices that people have. I think the third thing is to ensure that the social services, the schools, the education, the health services, the old folks are taken care of as well. They will continue to be paid. We're looking at the present moment the promise we made with regard to 40%, 20% increase last time, and another 20% to come. We haven't been able to gather everything for this budget, but we hope to put in a supplementary once we've cleared some of the revenue-generating activities that we're looking at the present moment, so that we can provide payments of that kind. There are a few other things that we're trying to do at the present moment, which will continue to help us, for example, retain our population, retain our key personnel that we have here, and hopefully even in that help make some savings for the government of Niue. I think the trick is sometimes to make sure that we provide these budgetary calculations so that they can be self-sustaining in the long term. I don't believe that we should be looking at, for example, short-term gains or short-term incursions when in fact we know that they will not be sustainable, and therefore we're working very hard at the present moment to ensure that in fact we can generate the revenues that we need to ensure that we keep our promise of paying people the extra 20% that we're looking at that we had promised way back in 2012.
Now, there's a lot of changes, of course, within the government sector and the public service. What about the private sector? Will we be looking at injecting a bit more funding into the private sector?
Yeah, well, there will be a lot of money, I believe, injected into the private sector. Let's, examine what we're trying to do. When we're looking at injecting money into the private sector, this is not just direct funds, but also indirect funds through projects that have been approved by government. So that most of the carpentry work now, most of the electrical work is done by people in the private sector. That's the sort of assistance that we're looking at generating, if you like, support to people in the private sector. The increased number of flights, the increased number of people that we're getting here, that will help people in the private sector.
There has been a major shift in government operations to restructure some of the revenue-making potentials, and Premier Talangi said his government want to ensure there is sufficient funds to continue development and to remunerate working people. He said the other focus for government is the private sector, and this is one area government will continue to improve development. Former Pacific Climate Change Roundtable Chair says climate change impacts increases with challenges. NERA Secretary to Government Richard Hipper, who is also former chair for the Pacific Climate Change Roundtable, said at a meeting in Fiji this week, we should set measurable targets in the Pacific in addressing climate change challenges. One major challenge is the access to some of the funds required to put our adaptation and mitigation work together. We have recognized a lot of this money has been pledged towards climate change, and yet some of those funds are very, very difficult to access. While the region tries to deal with these challenges, the impact of climate change and natural disaster continues to roll. He also said the impacts are more severe than expected and expect more severe ones heading to the Pacific region in the future. The Pacific have witnessed tsunami, cyclone and flooding in countries like Samoa and Fiji. People and governments need to realize that the seasons are rising and it's happening. Mr. Hipper said he would like to see some achievements from the meeting. He said the Pacific should go back and do a stock take of where each country has been before and try to reach those achievements. The climate change meeting is attended by Secretary of Government Richard Hipper and officials, leading to the main meeting next week. Knowing what to do with whale encounters is crucial, according to Niue Tourism Officer and Omatafua advocate Vanessa Marsh. According to Vanessa, the workshop facilitated this week by Olive Andrews, Tourism Office and Fisheries for whale watch operators and seafarers in general, gives a clear indication of legalities of each operations. Under the new regulation due to submit to government in September, the whale watch operators and all fishermen should understand and follow guidelines established in the regulations. Vanessa said Omatafua has actively researched and recorded whale activities in Niue and the Pacific, and the concentration this week is to ensure whales are protected from all activities on water. She said there has been incidents in the past where operators have not had the guidelines to adhere to, and it becomes difficult to monitor, but they hope that once operators learn of the proper procedures, activities can be a pleasure for all involved. Since the beginning of the whale season, approximately 5 whales have been spotted in Niue waters, but prediction, says Vanessa, is that the whale numbers will increase this season. Ms. Marsh said whale watching is one attraction Niue Tourism holds favourably as a marketing tool, and she hopes it will continue to attract tourists to the island. Some of the whale research, she said, has the young studs singing from Halingingi in the south, whilst the mothers and calves frolic in the north in Makifu. The World Health Organization confirms there is a clear correlation between climate change and increases in diseases in the Pacific. This was announced during a meeting in Fiji leading up to the Disaster Risk Management and Climate Change Roundtable next week, in which Niue is part of. For the Pacific, WHO identified malaria, dengue fever, diarrhea, typhoid, and leptospirosis are among the important climate-sensitive diseases. Dr. Rocco Kim, WHO's environmental health specialist, said evidence suggests that certain weather conditions are related to an increase in certain diseases. They found that after a very heavy drought in a country, there's an increase in cases of diarrhea. In a situation like that, They advised the Ministry of Health to prepare for possible increases in diarrhea cases. It is important to strengthen notifiable diseases surveillance program, which includes training of doctors to report to the government and respond quickly and timely to the situation. This early warning system is very effective. WHO estimates that 150,000 people die from climate-related diseases every year. 10 years ago, there were only 4 conditions: malaria, diarrhea, malnutrition, and extreme weather, considered in the calculations of disease burden because of strong evidence. WHO is recalculating the burden of disease with an extra 8 conditions added to the list because new evidence emerged in the past decade. And to end our news bulletin for tonight, Niue Rugby Union has now confirmed that the Rugby Sevens tournament will continue next Saturday, the 13th of July. Rankings in the competition still has Tuapa lead with 13 points, followed by Avaseli with 11 points, Southern Marlins with 9 points, and Alofi-Mako with 8 points after the first tournament. Reports that one more team will join the tournament has not been confirmed by the Niue Rugby Union. That's our news bulletin for tonight. Good evening.